On a quiet morning in the dense forests of Montana, Jack Taylor moved carefully through the trees. The air was crisp, and the sun filtered through the leaves, casting golden patterns on the forest floor. Jack was no stranger to these woods. As a wildlife biologist, he spent most of his days studying animals, tracking their movements, and documenting their behavior. But today felt different. There was an unusual stillness in the air, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Jack's boots crunched softly against the dirt as he followed a narrow trail that led to the river. He had been surveying this area for weeks, hoping to spot some rare species or uncover something new about the ecosystem. What he found, however, was beyond anything he could have imagined. Near the edge of the water, half hidden by tall grass and fallen branches, lay a strange creature. At first glance, it looked like a large cat, but there was something off about it. Its body shimmered faintly, covered in scales instead of fur, and its eyes, closed now, glowed faintly even in the daylight. The creature was clearly injured. One of its legs was twisted at an awkward angle, and dried blood caked its side. Jack knelt beside the animal, his heart pounding. He had never seen anything like it before. It wasn't a bear, a wolf, or any other predator native to the region. Whatever it was, it didn't belong here, not in this forest, not on this planet. But despite its alien appearance, it seemed fragile, vulnerable. Jack hesitated. He knew he should leave it alone. Picking up an unknown creature could be dangerous. Yet as he stared at its battered form, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. Carefully, Jack slipped off his jacket and wrapped it around the creature. It didn't stir, too weak to react. He hoisted it into his arms, surprised by how light it was, and began the long trek back to his cabin. The journey was slow and exhausting, but Jack didn't stop. Something deep inside told him this creature needed help, and he was the only one who could provide it. When Jack finally reached his cabin, he laid the creature gently on a pile of blankets near the fireplace. It let out a soft groan, its glowing eyes flickering open for a moment before closing again. Jack studied it closely, noting the sharp claws, the sleek tail, and the faint markings along its sides. It looked like a predator, built for speed and strength, yet it seemed almost innocent. Over the next few days, Jack worked tirelessly to nurse the creature back to health. He fed it raw meat, which it devoured eagerly once it regained enough energy to eat. He cleaned its wounds and kept the fire burning to keep it warm. Slowly but surely, the creature began to recover. Its injuries healed, and its movements became more fluid. Jack started calling it Shadow, a name that fit its dark, mysterious nature. As Shadow grew stronger, Jack noticed something remarkable about it. It wasn't just intelligent, it was highly perceptive. It seemed to understand when Jack was happy, sad, or frustrated, responding with subtle changes in its behavior. Sometimes it would tilt its head and watch him with those glowing eyes, as if trying to communicate. Other times it would curl up at his feet, purring softly, the sound vibrating through the room like a low hum. Despite its growing bond with Jack, Shadow still had moments where its instincts took over. One evening, while Jack was chopping wood outside, Shadow suddenly froze, its ears twitching. A low growl rumbled in its throat as it crouched low to the ground, ready to pounce. Jack turned quickly, expecting to see a deer or some other prey, but there was nothing, just the wind rustling through the trees. "What's gotten into you?" Jack asked, scratching Shadow behind the ears. The creature relaxed after a moment, returning to his side, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that Shadow was aware of things he couldn't see. Word of Shadow spread quickly among the locals. Jack tried to keep the creature hidden, fearing what people might do if they discovered it, but rumors began circulating anyway. Some claimed Jack had adopted a mutant animal, while others whispered about aliens and government experiments. Linda, Harper, Jack's neighbor, stopped by one afternoon to voice her concerns. "That thing doesn't belong here," she said bluntly, standing on Jack's porch with her arms crossed. "It's not natural, Jack. What if it turns on you, or worse, what if it hurts someone else?" Jack sighed, leaning against the door frame. "Linda, it's harmless. You don't need to worry." "Harmless?" she shot back. It's twice the size of a cougar and looks like it crawled out of a nightmare. Don't tell me it's harmless." Jack didn't argue further. He knew Linda meant well, but she didn't understand Shadow the way he did. To her, it was a threat, a dangerous, unpredictable force. To Jack, it was something more. It was a companion, a mystery, and maybe even a friend. That night, as Jack sat by the fire with Shadow curled up beside him, he thought about Linda's words. Was he being reckless? Could Shadow really pose a danger? These questions gnawed at him, but deep down he trusted the bond they had formed. Shadow had saved his life once, chasing away a pack of wolves that had cornered him during a hike. Return, Jack had given Shadow a second chance at survival. They owed each other, and Jack believed that counted for something. But the uneasy feeling lingered. Shadow wasn't like any other animal Jack had ever encountered. It was smarter, faster, and stronger, and sometimes, late at night, it would let out a haunting howl that echoed through the valley, sending shivers down Jack's spine. It was as if Shadow was searching for something, or someone. Jack didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change forever. Shadow's arrival had set events in motion that would lead him far beyond the safety of his cabin and into a world he could scarcely comprehend. For now, though, all he could do was wait, and hope that whatever destiny awaited them wouldn't come knocking too soon. As the weeks turned into months, Shadow grew stronger and more confident. The once fragile creature now moved with grace and power, its sleek body cutting through the forest like a shadow in the night. Jack watched with pride as Shadow learned to hunt, leaping silently from tree branches to take down prey with precision. It was clear that Shadow was no ordinary animal. It was a born predator, perfectly designed for survival. Despite its hunting prowess, Shadow remained surprisingly gentle with Jack. It followed him everywhere, padding quietly at his heels as he went about his daily tasks. When Jack sat by the fire in the evenings, Shadow would curl up beside him, its glowing eyes reflecting the flames. Sometimes it would let out a soft purr, the sound vibrating through the cabin like a lullaby. These moments made Jack forget how strange and otherworldly Shadow truly was. Their bond deepened with each passing day. Jack began to notice small details about Shadow's behavior that hinted at its intelligence. For instance, Shadow seemed to understand when Jack was upset or stressed. On days when Jack returned from town feeling frustrated after arguing with locals who disapproved of Shadow, the creature would nuzzle against his hand or rest its head on his lap. It was almost as if Shadow could sense his emotions and wanted to comfort him. But Shadow wasn't always calm and docile. There were times when its instincts took over, revealing glimpses of its true nature. One afternoon, while exploring the woods together, Jack stumbled upon a rattlesnake coiled near a fallen log. Before he could react, Shadow sprang forward, moving faster than Jack's eyes could follow. In an instant, the snake was pinned beneath Shadow's claws, lifeless. Jack stared in awe, both impressed and slightly unnerved by the speed and ferocity of the attack. "Okay," Jack muttered, stepping back cautiously. "I get it. You're protecting me." Shadow glanced at him briefly before releasing the snake and trotting ahead as if nothing had happened. Jack shook his head, marveling at the duality of Shadow's personality. It was fiercely protective, yet oddly affectionate, a combination that left him both grateful and wary. Not everyone shared Jack's admiration for Shadow. Linda Harper continued to voice her concerns, often stopping by unannounced to lecture him about the dangers of keeping such a creature. Her warnings became more frequent as reports of livestock disappearing spread throughout the area. Farmers blamed wolves or coyotes, but rumors began to circulate that Shadow might be responsible. "It's only a matter of time before it kills something bigger," Linda said one evening, standing on Jack's porch with her arms crossed. "And then what? Are you going to defend it when it slaughters someone's cattle or worse, attacks a person?" Jack clenched his jaw, trying to stay calm. "Linda, I've told you before, Shadow isn't hurting anyone. If animals are going missing, it's not because of him." "Him?" she scoffed. "You're calling it him now? That thing is not a pet, Jack. It's a monster." Her words stung, but Jack refused to argue. He knew she wouldn't understand, just like so many others in town. To them, Shadow was a threat, a wild, unpredictable force that didn't belong. But to Jack, Shadow was family. He couldn't imagine turning his back on the creature that had saved his life and trusted him completely. The tension between Jack and the townsfolk reached a boiling point one chilly morning when a group of hunters showed up at his cabin. Led by Bill Dawson, a burly rancher with a reputation for being hot-headed, they demanded answers. Bill stepped onto the porch, his rifle slung over his shoulder, and glared at Jack. "We've had enough of your little experiment," Bill growled. "That thing needs to go. Either you get rid of it, or we will." Jack stood his ground, meeting Bill's gaze without flinching. "Shadow stays here. He hasn't done anything wrong." "Oh, really?" Bill snapped. "Then explain the goats my brother lost last week, or the cow that turned up dead 2 nights ago. Tracks all over the place, big ones. Sound familiar?" Jack hesitated. He hadn't seen Shadow leave the property recently, but he couldn't deny the possibility. Shadow was a hunter, after all. Could it have wandered farther than usual? The thought troubled him, but he refused to give in to fear. "I'll keep an eye on him," Jack said firmly. "But I'm not giving him up." Bill's face reddened with anger. "You're making a mistake, Taylor. Mark my words. This ends badly." With that, the hunters left, muttering threats under their breath. Jack watched them disappear into the trees, his stomach churning with unease. He hated conflict, especially with people he'd known most of his life, but he also knew he couldn't abandon Shadow, not after everything they'd been through. That night, as Jack sat by the fire, Shadow lay curled up at his feet. The cabin felt quieter than usual, the weight of the day's events pressing down on Jack. He stared into the flames, thinking about Bill's words. Was he being reckless? Could Shadow really pose a danger to the community? Before he could dwell on it further, Shadow suddenly lifted its head, ears twitching. A low growl rumbled in its throat as it rose to its feet, its glowing eyes fixed on the window. Jack grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, scanning the darkness for signs of movement. The forest was eerily silent, the kind of stillness that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "What is it?" Jack whispered, glancing at Shadow. The creature stood rigid, its tail flicking back and forth like a warning flag. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a distant howl pierced the air, long and mournful. It wasn't the call of a wolf or a coyote. It was deeper, richer, and somehow alien. Shadow responded with a howl of its own, the sound echoing through the valley. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard Shadow make noises before, but this was different. This was communication. "Who are you talking to?" Jack murmured, looking at Shadow. The creature didn't answer, of course. Instead, it turned and bolted into the woods, vanishing into the shadows. Jack hesitated, torn between following Shadow and staying safe. Finally, curiosity got the better of him. Grabbing a jacket and his rifle, he set off into the forest, guided by the faint glow of Shadow's markings. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie patterns on the ground as Jack pushed deeper into the wilderness. After nearly an hour of searching, he found Shadow standing at the edge of a clearing. Its head was tilted upward, staring at something in the sky. Jack followed its gaze and froze. Hovering above the treetops was a massive object, a ship, sleek and metallic, unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It pulsed with a faint blue light, humming softly as if alive. For a moment, Jack forgot to breathe. His mind raced, struggling to make sense of what he was seeing. Shadow let out another howl, louder this time, and the ship responded with a burst of light that illuminated the entire clearing. Jack realized then that Shadow wasn't just some strange animal. It was part of something much bigger. Something that stretched far beyond the forests of Montana and into the vast unknown of space. The ship in the sky remained motionless, its blue light casting an otherworldly glow over the clearing. Jack stood frozen, his heart pounding as he tried to process what he was seeing. Shadow, however, seemed unbothered. It let out another howl, its tail swishing back and forth like a cat greeting its owner. The sound resonated through the air, and the ship responded with a low hum that vibrated deep in Jack's chest. "What is this?" Jack whispered to himself, clutching his rifle. "Tighter." He glanced at Shadow, hoping for some kind of explanation, but the creature simply stared up at the ship, its glowing eyes reflecting the strange light. Whatever was happening, it was clear that Shadow understood it, even if Jack didn't. Suddenly, a beam of light shot down from the ship, striking the ground just a few feet away. Jack stumbled backward, shielding his eyes as the brightness intensified. When the light faded, 3 figures stood where the beam had touched the earth. They were tall and slender, their bodies covered in sleek metallic suits that shimmered like liquid silver. Their faces were hidden behind smooth helmets, but their presence radiated authority. Jack's breath caught in his throat. His mind screamed at him to run, to grab Shadow and flee into the woods, but his legs refused to move. Shadow, on the other hand, stepped forward confidently, letting out a soft growl that sounded almost welcoming. One of the figures tilted its head, studying Shadow intently before turning its gaze toward Jack. For a moment, no one moved. Then, one of the figures raised a device in its hand, a small rectangular object that emitted a series of clicks and whirs. A voice followed, distorted but understandable, speaking in broken English. "This belongs to us," the figure said, pointing at Shadow. Its tone was cold and emotionless, leaving no room for argument. Jack swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "What do you mean?" "Shadow is mine. I've taken care of him." The figure paused, tilting its head again as if processing his words. "You misunderstand. This creature is not yours. It is royal, belongs to Empress." "Empress?" Jack repeated, his mind racing. "What are you talking about?" Before the figure could respond, Shadow stepped between them, letting out a low growl. The sound was deeper and more menacing than Jack had ever heard before, and the aliens seemed to take notice. One of them raised a hand, and the others lowered their weapons slightly, though they didn't relax completely. "He protects you," the lead figure said, its voice carrying a hint of curiosity. "Why?" "I don't know what you're asking," Jack admitted, his voice trembling. "I found him injured. He was alone. I helped him because it was the right thing to do." The alien studied him for a long moment, then turned its attention back to Shadow. It extended a gloved hand, and Shadow sniffed it cautiously before letting out a soft purr. The tension in the clearing eased slightly, but Jack still felt uneasy. These creatures were clearly advanced, far beyond anything humanity had achieved. If they wanted to take Shadow, there was nothing Jack could do to stop them. "You will return him now," the alien said firmly. "He is needed." "No," Jack blurted out before he could stop himself. The aliens turned their heads sharply, their movements unnervingly synchronized. Jack took a step back, raising his hands defensively. "Look, I don't know who you are or why you want him, but Shadow stays with me. He's part of my life now." The lead alien tilted its head again, this time with what might have been amusement. "You care for him. We see this, but you cannot keep him. He is royal blood. Important." "Royal blood?" Jack echoed, his thoughts spinning. "You're saying he's royalty?" "Yes," the alien replied simply. "Offspring of Empress, future ruler." Jack stared at Shadow, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was hearing. All this time he had thought Shadow was just a strange animal, maybe even extraterrestrial, but he never imagined it was tied to some kind of alien monarchy. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Shadow wasn't just intelligent, it was special, important enough to warrant a visit from these beings. I didn't know," Jack stammered, glancing at Shadow. The creature looked back. At him, its glowing eyes filled with something Jack couldn't quite place. Was it gratitude, sadness, or maybe both? The lead alien stepped closer, its movements fluid and deliberate. "You have done well, kept him safe. For this we thank you. But now, duty calls. He must come with us." Jack felt torn. On one hand, he wanted to protect Shadow, to keep it safe from whatever dangers lay ahead. On the other hand, he knew he couldn't stand in the way of something so much bigger than himself. Shadow wasn't human. It belonged to a world Jack couldn't begin to understand. "What happens if I say no?" Jack asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. The alien's helmet shifted slightly, as if it were narrowing its eyes. "We do not seek conflict, but we will take him, by force if necessary." Jack clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. He hated feeling powerless, especially when it came to Shadow. But deep down, he knew there was no winning this fight. These beings weren't here to negotiate. They were here to reclaim what was theirs. And Shadow deserved to be with its own kind. "Fine," Jack said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "But promise me one thing. Promise me you'll take care of him." The alien paused, perhaps surprised by the request. After a moment, it nodded slowly. "We swear it. He is precious to us." Jack exhaled sharply, stepping aside to allow the aliens access to Shadow. The creature hesitated, looking back at Jack with those glowing eyes. For a brief moment, Jack thought Shadow might resist, might choose to stay with him. But instead it let out a soft purr and walked toward the aliens, its tail flicking gently. As the aliens led Shadow back to the ship, Jack felt a lump rise in his throat. He wanted to call out, to beg Shadow to stay, but he forced himself to remain silent. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about Shadow and its destiny. The ship's light grew brighter as the aliens boarded, pulling Shadow inside. Jack shielded his eyes, watching as the vessel ascended into the sky. Within seconds, it disappeared, leaving only silence behind. Jack stood in the clearing for a long time, staring at the spot where the ship had been. The forest felt emptier now, quieter. Without Shadow, it was just another stretch of wilderness. Slowly, Jack turned and began walking back to his cabin, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the porch, he sat down heavily, leaning against the railing. The firelight from inside spilled out onto the yard, but it did little to warm him. He had lost something irreplaceable tonight, but he also knew he had made the right choice. Shadow wasn't meant for this world. For his world, it belonged among the stars with its own people. As the night wore on, Jack couldn't shake the image of Shadow's glowing eyes, watching him with a mixture of trust and sadness. He wondered if Shadow would remember him, if it would ever think about the human who had cared for it during its time on Earth. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of Montana's forests, a young predator roared, a sound both fierce and mournful, echoing across galaxies. The days that followed Shadow's departure were the hardest Jack had ever faced. The cabin felt eerily quiet without the soft padding of Shadow's footsteps or the low hum of its purring. Jack tried to keep busy, throwing himself into his work and spending long hours in the woods, but nothing could fill the void left behind. Every rustle of leaves or distant howl made him glance over his shoulder, half expecting to see Shadow bounding toward him. But the forest remained empty. Linda Harper stopped by one afternoon, her usual stern expression softened by concern. She carried a basket filled with fresh bread and fruit, setting it down on Jack's porch without a word. For once, she didn't lecture him about Shadow or warn him about the dangers of keeping wild animals. Instead, she simply said, "I'm sorry." Jack nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Thanks, Linda, I appreciate it." She hesitated, glancing at the woods beyond the cabin. Do you think it's really gone for good?" "I don't know," Jack admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But I think it's better this way. It wasn't meant to stay here." Linda nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "Still, it must have been hard letting it go." "It was," Jack said quietly. "But sometimes doing the right thing hurts." Linda didn't press further. After a few more moments of awkward silence, she turned to leave, calling over her shoulder, "Take care of yourself, Jack." As the days stretched into weeks, Jack began to settle back into a routine. He resumed his surveys of the forest, jotting notes about animal behavior and tracking changes in the ecosystem. But something inside him had shifted. The world felt smaller now, less mysterious. Knowing that creatures like Shadow existed, and that they came from somewhere far beyond Earth, had changed the way he saw everything. One evening, as Jack sat by the fire, he heard a faint noise outside. At first he thought it was the wind, but then it came again. A soft thud, followed by the crunch of leaves. Grabbing his flashlight, he stepped onto the porch and scanned the darkness. His heart skipped a beat when he saw movement near the edge of the trees. "Shadow?" he called out, his voice trembling with hope. But it wasn't Shadow. Standing in the shadows was a figure clad in a metallic suit, its helmet reflecting the moonlight. Jack froze, his mind racing. Was this one of the aliens who had taken Shadow? Had they come back for him? The figure stepped forward, raising a hand in what seemed like a gesture of peace. "Do not fear," it said, its voice distorted but calm. "We mean no harm." Jack swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight tightly. "What do you want?" "We have returned to speak with you," the alien replied. "About the royal cub." Jack's chest tightened. "Is Shadow okay? Did something happen?" "He is well," the alien assured him. "Stronger than ever. The Empress is pleased." Relief washed over Jack, though it was short-lived. "Then why are you here?" The alien paused, tilting its imbued head slightly. "You saved him. You cared for him when we could not. For this we owe you gratitude." Jack shook his head. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because he needed help." "Yes," the alien said, its tone almost thoughtful. "And yet your actions have altered the course of our empire. The cub speaks often of you, of your kindness, your courage." Jack blinked, stunned. "He remembers me?" "He does," the alien confirmed. "And so does the Empress." Before Jack could respond, the alien gestured toward the sky. A moment later, a ship descended silently, hovering above the clearing just as it had before. This time, however, the light it emitted was softer, less intimidating. The alien motioned for Jack to follow, and after a brief hesitation he did. Inside the ship, Jack found himself surrounded by technology unlike anything he'd ever seen. Smooth walls glowed faintly, and strange symbols floated in midair, shifting and rearranging themselves as if alive. The air smelled clean, almost sterile, and the hum of the engines vibrated softly beneath his feet. At the center of the room stood another figure, taller and more regal than the others. Her suit shimmered like liquid gold, and her helmet was adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. When she removed her helmet, Jack gasped. Her face was striking, not human but beautiful in an otherworldly way. Her eyes glowed faintly, much like Shadow's, and her presence commanded respect. "You are the human who raised my child," she said, her voice rich and melodic. It wasn't a question. Jack nodded, feeling both awestruck and intimidated. "Yes, I didn't know he was yours at the time. I just found him injured and took care of him." The Empress studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Jack's surprise, she bowed her head slightly. "You have done us a great service. My son owes his life to you." Jack shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. "I didn't do it for recognition. I just wanted to help. And that is why we honor you," the Empress said firmly. Few humans would show such compassion to a creature they did not understand. Fewer still would give it up when asked. Jack looked away, his throat tight. "It wasn't easy, but I knew he belonged with you, with his family." The Empress nodded, her glowing eyes softening. "Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, nor will your bond with my son. He has spoken of you often, of your kindness, your strength." Jack felt a lump rise in his throat. "Does he miss me?" "He does," the Empress admitted. "But he understands his duty, as do I." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the Empress gestured to one of her guards, who stepped forward holding a small device. It resembled a crystal orb, pulsing with a faint blue light. "This is a gift," the Empress explained. "A token of our gratitude. Should you ever need us, for protection, for guidance, or simply to see my son again, you need only activate it. We will come." Jack accepted the orb cautiously, his fingers brushing against its cool surface. "Thank you," he murmured. "But I don't deserve this." "You do," the Empress insisted. "Not all humans are worthy of trust, but you have proven yourself, and for that, you will always have a place among us." Before Jack could respond, the ship began to ascend. The walls shimmered, and within seconds he found himself back in the clearing, the orb clutched tightly in his hand. The ship disappeared into the sky, leaving only silence behind. Jack stared at the orb for a long time, his mind racing. He had expected anger, maybe even hostility from the aliens. Instead, he had been met with gratitude and respect. And while part of him wished he could see Shadow again, he knew the creature was where it belonged, with its family among the stars. As he walked back to his cabin, Jack couldn't help but smile. Life would never be the same after this. The world felt bigger now, full of possibilities he couldn't yet comprehend. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of Montana's forests, a young predator roared, a sound both fierce and mournful, echoing across galaxies. Months passed, and life in the Montana wilderness slowly returned to normal. Jack Taylor continued his work as a wildlife biologist, tracking animals and documenting their behaviors. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on his tasks, his thoughts often drifted back to Shadow and the strange events that had unfolded. The crystal orb sat on a shelf in his cabin, glowing faintly at night like a distant star. It was a constant reminder of the bond he shared with Shadow, and the promise that their paths might cross again someday. The townsfolk noticed a change in Jack. He seemed quieter, more introspective. Linda Harper stopped by occasionally, bringing food or simply checking in. She never mentioned Shadow, sensing it was a topic too painful for him to discuss. Instead, she talked about her farm, the weather, and the latest gossip from town. Jack appreciated her efforts, even if he rarely contributed much to the conversation. One evening, as Jack sat by the fire, he heard a sound outside, a low growl, followed by the crunch of leaves. His heart skipped a beat. Grabbing his flashlight, he stepped onto the porch and scanned the darkness. For a moment, he thought he saw movement near the edge of the trees, but when he called out, there was no response. Shaking his head, he told himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. But the next night, the sound came again. This time, Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed the crystal orb and stepped outside, his pulse racing. The forest was eerily quiet, the kind of stillness that made his skin crawl. Then, from the shadows, emerged a figure, tall and shimmering, clad in a metallic suit. "You called," the alien said, its voice calm and steady. "I didn't call," Jack replied, clutching the orb tightly. I heard something." The alien tilted its head, studying him. "You hold the gift of the Empress. It is tied to your thoughts, your longing." Jack frowned, glancing at the orb. "So, I summoned you?" "In a way," the alien admitted. "Your desire reached us. We have come to answer." Jack's mind raced. He hadn't meant to summon anyone, he hadn't even touched the orb. But now that they were here, he couldn't deny the ache in his chest, the yearning to see Shadow one last time. "Is he here?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien nodded. "He waits aboard the ship. If you wish, you may see him." Jack hesitated, torn between excitement and fear. What would Shadow be like now? Would he even remember Jack? But before doubt could take hold, Jack nodded. "Yes, I want to see him." The alien gestured toward the sky, and moments later, the massive ship descended silently, casting a soft glow over the clearing. Jack followed the alien inside, his heart pounding as the familiar hum of the engines surrounded him. The interior of the ship was just as breathtaking as he remembered, with glowing walls and floating symbols that pulsed with energy. At the center of the room stood Shadow, or rather, the creature Shadow had become. He was larger now, his sleek body rippling with muscle. His scales shimmered like liquid silver and his glowing eyes burned brighter than ever. But what struck Jack most was the intelligence in those eyes, the depth of understanding that went far beyond any earth-born animal. Shadow let out a low purr, stepping forward cautiously. Jack knelt down, holding out his hand. For a moment, Shadow hesitated, then he bounded forward, nearly knocking Jack off his feet. The force of the impact sent both of them sprawling, but Jack didn't care. He wrapped his arms around Shadow, laughing and crying at the same time. "I missed you," Jack murmured, burying his face in Shadow's neck. Shadow responded with a deep, rumbling purr, nuzzling against him like he used to. The Empress appeared a short while later, her golden suit glowing softly in the dim light. She watched the reunion with a faint smile, her glowing eyes filled with warmth. "He has grown strong," she said, addressing Jack. "Thanks to you." Jack looked up, wiping tears from his face. "He's amazing. I always knew he was special." "Yes," the Empress agreed. "And so are you. Few humans possess the courage to care for what they do not understand. Fewer still would give it up when asked." Jack shook his head. "I didn't do anything special. I just loved him." The Empress nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Love is a rare thing, even among our kind. Do not underestimate its power." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jack stayed on the floor, Shadow curled up beside him, their bond as strong as ever. But eventually the Empress broke the silence. "It is time," she said gently. "He cannot remain here. His destiny lies among the stars." Jack swallowed hard, forcing himself to nod. "I know. I just needed to see him one last time." The Empress extended a hand, helping Jack to his feet. "You will always have a place among us, should you need us, for protection, for guidance, or simply to visit. We will come." Jack managed a weak smile. "Thank you." As Shadow followed the Empress back toward the center of the ship, he glanced over his shoulder, letting out a soft growl. Jack waved, his throat too tight to speak. Then, with a final burst of light, the ship ascended into the sky, disappearing into the stars. Back at his cabin, Jack sat by the fire, cradling the crystal orb in his hands. The woods felt quiet again, empty without Shadow's presence. But this time the emptiness didn't feel so heavy. Jack knew Shadow was safe, thriving among his own kind. And though they were worlds apart, their bond remained unbroken. As the fire crackled softly, Jack leaned back in his chair, staring at the orb. It pulsed faintly, a comforting reminder that he was never truly alone. Somewhere, far beyond the eye, reach of Montana's forests, a young predator roared, a sound both fierce and mournful, echoing across galaxies, and somewhere deep within Jack's heart, he felt it, a connection that transcended distance, species, and time, a bond forged in trust, love, and sacrifice. Whatever the future held, Jack knew one thing for certain. Shadow would always be part of his life, just as he would always be part of Shadow's. And maybe, just maybe, their paths would cross again someday. Until then, Jack would wait, watching the stars and dreaming of the day when the universe brought them together once more.